Well, I want to invite you this morning to open up your Bibles initially to Psalm 68. Psalm 68. As we turn there to Psalm 68, this past week was my wife Greta's birthday, and we as a family went over to Carrabba's because that's one of the places she likes. And as we were going in, I saw a sign there at Carrabba's. Carrabba's now delivers food, right? And you're used to Domino's delivers and, Papa John's delivers, and I know Fontana's delivers in town. But to have Carrabba's say, you can now sit in your house, we will bring our food to you where you are, right? Do you deliver? Yes, we do. I was sitting with Greta this week and with our children having kind of moved out and in transitioning situations, and she's on this Facebook page, I don't know what it's called, but where you can buy and sell things, and she's looking for deals for them, for different things, and she found a piece of furniture, or whatever, that would be great, but to get it, we'd have to go to Flemington, New Jersey or something. They don't deliver, and forget it. Doesn't matter what kind of deal it is if we've got to go there to get it, right? Do you deliver? Can you bring what I need to where I am? Obviously, there are companies, Federal Express, UPS, others that are built on that. And the day may be coming where we're seeing each other's deliveries flying over our house, right? In those, whatever they're experimenting with right now, right? Do you deliver? And now it's how fast can you deliver? How quickly can you get what I need to me? Does God deliver? Does God's heart of love, does his hand of care reach to where I am? Is there anything I can do to speed up his delivery? Psalm 68, I had you turn there initially because verse 20 makes a statement about God. This, God is to us a God of deliverances, and to God the Lord belong escapes from death. For the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at some real life events in Scripture with the hope that it will strengthen your faith in that verse. Strengthen our faith in the fact that we have a God. We are the children of a God who is closer to you than your very own breath. And so we want to, over the next few weeks, hopefully by looking at different lives, find ourselves strengthened that, yes, I do believe what Psalm 68:20 says. I do believe that we have a God who delivers. So we begin today by turning to Acts chapter 7. It'll point us back to the book of Genesis because Stephen does a lot of that in his words in Acts chapter 7. But in Acts chapter 7 in the New Testament, in verse 9, Stephen says this: the patriarchs became jealous of Joseph, and they sold him into Egypt. Yet God was with him and rescued, it's the same word, delivered, rescued him from all his afflictions and granted him favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he made him governor over Egypt and all his household. Where do we read that? We read it back in Genesis chapter 37. And so today we want to look at that, the story of Joseph. And so if you want to go back to the first book of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37, and we kind of want to begin, as we're looking at his story, with this first point of when you don't know where the road will lead you. Every day we make decisions that set us on a road, and we don't know where that road will lead us. There are times where we enter into a vehicle, There are times when we enter into a relationship. There are times when we enter into a building. There are times when we enter into a situation and we have no idea that the decision to enter into that is going to take us into a place where we need to be delivered. Maybe that vehicle you entered into is now overturned, and you need someone to extricate you from that vehicle. Maybe that relationship you entered into has now turned violent and dangerous, and you need to be delivered from it. And there are countless times in life, more than one happening at a time, right, that we enter on roads, and those times when you don't know where the road will lead you. Well, in Genesis chapter 37, we look at some of those roads in Joseph's life. For we read in verse 1, "Now Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan, and these are the records of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a vari-colored tunic. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms." Now, the first road we're told about that Joseph walks on is bringing back a bad report about his brothers. But that's not the first road to see, because that road has already been, there's a lot of road, a lot of pavement already beneath that. The most important road to see is what we see there in verse 3. When we read there, what? That Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons. Now, we need to know Israel is not the nation being spoken there. It's Jacob, the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. As a matter of fact, if you just looked a couple pages later in Genesis chapter 49, we read that Jacob summoned his sons. And when he summons them in Genesis 49 and verse 2, what does he say? "Gather together and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father." Jacob was named Israel, and he became the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. But this statement is not saying the nation loved Joseph. It's saying specifically what? That Jacob, Joseph's father, loved Joseph more than all of his other sons. What's important to see is the first road, the most primary road to look at that Joseph is walking on, is a road that he did not choose. It is a road that he had no control over initially. Jacob set his son Joseph on a road when he clearly favored him over his brothers. Favoritism will lead to hostility, and Jacob put Joseph on that road. What is favoritism? In my house growing up, I got yelled at more than Kathy did. I was punished more than Kathy was. And you know it, Dad, right? And was that favoritism? No. Kathy was far more obedient than I was. Kathy wanted to keep her dad and mom happy far more than I did. And so I was yelled at because I deserved to be yelled at. I was punished because I deserved to be punished. You know, as parents, you cannot share the discipline. If Vincent does 3 things wrong, you can't say, we punished him for 2 of them, we might as well punish Kathy for 1 of them. You can't. I get all 3 of the punishments. They were all 3 of my crimes, right? And so favoritism is not a kid saying, I'm getting grounded more than they are. It may be you deserve being grounded more than they do. That's not favoritism. Favoritism is setting people on unequal paths, on unlevel ground, unfairly. And so imagine you're going to run the 100-meter race, and you've been given lane 2. You're getting ready. Is it me? This lane looks like it goes uphill. It literally, I don't think it is me. And then you look over at lane 1 and you see him, and his lane is going downhill. As a matter of fact, at the 100-meter point, my lane is 3 feet higher than his lane is. That's not fair. And you're right. I can think of times, and those of you who have invested so many hours and did such a great job with our Grand Prix and built the thing and went back with Awana, or even more recently, right? You know, you guys that put all your time into it and run it, every so often you get a kid saying, this isn't fair. Lane yellow is faster than lane red or whatever. And then the guys put their car on lane yellow and it still loses, right? But this isn't fair. It's uneven. Joseph's life is there to remind us first what? Listen, there are going to be times in life that you are put on a lane that is not fair. There are going to be times where someone sets you on a road that will lead to trouble, and it's out of your control. Life isn't fair. The lanes we are put in are not all level. Sometimes people do things that already, without your control, set you on a road that may lead to you needing to be delivered. Jacob adds to that, right? He adds to that favoritism by doing what? By giving Joseph this special coat. Everybody knew what the coat meant. It clearly designated to everybody that Joseph was being handed the top status. Gene Getz, in his book on the life of Joseph, says Jacob was letting everyone know that Joseph held the favored position in the family, and that he was planning to treat Joseph as the firstborn with all of its privileges. I'm one of 4 brothers. Joseph was one of 12 brothers. I know in my own sin nature how I would feel if a brother was being handed something that the rest of us weren't being handed, right? That it was, but it's almost hard in our culture to understand how significant it was to be designated as the firstborn. It was the privileges all landed to the firstborn. It just, right? And to the firstborn son. And I know a lot of you gals would say, yeah, that's not fair. And that was their cultural setup, right? It's no surprise how the brothers felt. We read it there in verse 4. We read it. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him, and they could not speak to him on friendly terms. Eastern culture makes it clear that the one thing you absolutely in that culture did was anytime you greeted someone, you gave them a word of peace, right? Peace be unto thee. And we're told they couldn't even speak. It says there in the New American Standard, friendly terms, but literally, they couldn't speak peace to him. They couldn't even say to him, peace be unto thee. Oh. See, Joseph has been set on a road that will lead to his need for rescue. And this particular road isn't even his fault. I remember in the early 70s, mid-70s, I don't remember the dynamics per se as much as hearing testimony about it from those who lived it, but when some of our Vietnam soldiers were returning and they were coming back to our country and they were being looked at with disdain. They had nothing to do with the politics of the Vietnam War. They had nothing to do with the injustice that some might have been involved in there, you know, in that savage setting. But they were being put on a road by people. They were set there because of something that was out of their control. I remember in the early 2000s, right? I remember thinking this at the time when the scandal arose in the Roman Catholic Church with priests and their abuse of young boys and the church kind of covering it up. And I remember thinking at the time, how many good, moral, upstanding priests who sought to do right knew that when they walked in a public place with their collar on, that there were some people looking at them just going, probably a pervert, that guy, right? And they had been placed on a road by the actions of other priests or the church leadership. It was out of their control. Not one of us in this room has chosen our skin color. And yet, there are people that hate you or may be angry at you just because your skin is black or white or whatever it may be. They have already set you on a road that you have absolutely no control over. Maybe with technology now, I'm hearing it more. It's touched our family even. Maybe somebody has spoofed your phone number and people are contacting you saying, why are you calling me? Why are you texting me? And you're saying, I'm not. Somebody has somehow pirated your cell number and they're doing that. Or maybe it's happened in our church with several of you, they've stolen your Facebook account and people, they're using your account to commit fraud or scams or whatever. And I'm getting put in these things, or somebody stole my identity and I'm facing this issue. Whatever it may be in life, I am sitting here and it wasn't me who caused this. Somebody put me on this road by a decision that they made or by something that they did. That's what happened to Joseph. And then, of course, sometimes the road that we're placed on merges with the roads that we choose. And the lane just gets a little wider. We see that second road in verse 5. We read, then Joseph of Genesis 37, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, please listen to this dream which I have had. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood erect, and behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. Then his brothers said to him, are you actually going to reign over us? Or are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. This dream, we will see, obviously is prophetic in some way about what's going to happen. But we don't ever read anywhere that God specifically directed the dream or told Joseph, go tell your brothers about this dream. I tend to agree with Stuart Briscoe, who says, I wish I could have told Joseph at that moment, there is truth and there is tact. Just because you have the ability to put a message on Twitter doesn't mean you should. Just because what you think is true is something you can say at this moment, might not be the moment to say it. Or maybe it should be said in a different way. There is a tactfulness to how you can handle truth, right? Joseph needed a marketing media company to say to him, here, look, what do you want us to get across? Let us get past the filters, right? For that message. What does Joseph do? Joseph goes to his brothers. Hey, you guys! Listen to this. This is unbelievable. I had this dream, and my wheat it rose up, and your wheat all kind of fell down and bowed down to it. Isn't that amazing? One of his brothers, I'm thinking, isn't that special, right? Isn't that, wow, that's wonderful. We're just so happy for you. No. Are you serious? Whew. When a coach selects a player to be the MVP, that coach has really determined two things. The end of a hard season, that coach has determined you are the most valuable player of this team, and that coach has determined the rest of you are not the most valuable player of this team, right? Now, sometimes it may be, look, we all agree. You know, we wouldn't have won any games without them or whatever. But lots of times it has to do with how the MVP handles it. Do they immediately say, hey, this really goes to the team because this team, they were, you know, I would never have been able to serve my role if it wasn't for what they were doing? Or does the MVP say, I really had a great year? As a matter of fact, I'd like to start a debate out there. I believe I'm the greatest of all time. Fight about that amongst yourselves and give your evidence. You know, that is a little different way of handling it. What we know is Joseph tells his brothers, and what did we read there? They hated him even more. Joseph, little word of advice to you. Don't get caught out here on the road all by yourself if we're all around. And yet somehow Joseph's father decides, you know what I should do? I'm going to send Joseph out on the road all by himself to go check on his brothers and bring me back a report. After he had already brought back a bad report before. And where does that lead? It leads to his brothers saying, oh, here he comes. And let's kill him. And they're going to throw him in a pit, and they do that. And why shouldn't we make something off of this? And we'll spare his life. And they sell him into slavery, where a third road now merges in. Because if Joseph is sold into slavery, as you turn along to Genesis chapter 39, he ends up, and many of you know the story, in the house of a man called Potiphar. And he is a tremendous worker and an honest person, and God's hand is clearly on him, and Potiphar puts him in charge of the other slaves in the household. But Potiphar's wife also notices him, and we read that he was handsome in form and appearance. And in verse 7, it came about after these events that his master's wife, Potiphar's wife, looked with desire at Joseph. And she said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. He's put me in charge of all that he owns, right? And he goes on to say, no. Verse 10, as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he did not listen to her. Joseph seeks to be clear. No. He seeks to reject the proposal. No. Why? Because Joseph knows when you choose to sin, you are choosing a road that will lead to trouble. When you choose to sin, you are choosing to break fellowship with God. You are choosing to lose the peace that you can have with God. You are choosing to place yourself, if you're God's child, underneath his discipline to bring you back. It's a road of trouble. But Joseph is going to learn something else. When you choose not to sin, that may also put you on a road of suffering. It might. When you choose not to sin, it may put you on a road of suffering, and it stings. Joseph rejects, and Potiphar's wife lies about him, and she cries out, he was attacking me, and I cried, and he ran off, and I have his garment. And we read in verse 19 of Genesis 39, now when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, this is what your slave did to me, his anger burned. His brothers, he didn't do it, his father favored him, but his brother's anger burned at him. And then a road merged in where he had this dream, and I think that just not very wisely shared it in such an enthusiastic way with his brothers, and their anger is burning at him more. And now this other road merges in, and Potiphar burns with anger at him. And in verse 20, so Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. The sting of choosing the road not to sin, to stay away from trouble, and yet that road leads to suffering. Sometimes we'll be driving, I think I've made it clear to you before, in terrible traffic, I'm not the person who's kind of just, I see skies of blue. That's just, it's not. I'm trying. No, I'm the person who's saying the GPS, that's a big that red line, the traffic, see how far that red line is, and can I get away from that red line, Gret? And she's looking, and well, if we get off this exit, there's another red line, and sometimes you can't avoid the red lines. You're going to be in it. When we don't know where the roads will lead, but sometimes it comes to the second point, which is shorter than the first. When you do know where the roads have led, you know where you've ended up. You know where you are. Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. Joseph will sit in that prison for at least 2 years, as many as 12, 13. We just don't know. We know that the time span from when he began in Potiphar's house, right? So we don't know if this event happened early in his time in Potiphar's house or toward the end of his time in Potiphar's house. And that's why, at the very least, we know he sat in prison for a little over 2 years. It could have been far more extensive. I tend to think it was several years beyond that. Can you imagine his thoughts, though, sitting there? Alfred Edersheim, in his work, shares this: the contrast could scarcely be greater between his former prophetic dreams and his present situation. Sitting there in jail saying, I remember the morning that I woke up from that one dream and what the future held for me. And yet here I am. My daughter Natalie this week was involved in a little car accident. And she shared, when I was kind of just shortly there on the scene to be with her, she kind of just shared those, right? When you don't know where the road will lead, she says, Dad, I came out of Barnes & Noble. I had been enjoying the Lord in there. I had been talking to the Lord. I was in such a good mood when I got in the car, because you don't know where it's going to lead. And boy, when the accident occurred, I think how wonderful I felt just a little bit ago. But when you don't know where the road's going to lead, but you realize where it has led. And you may be in a time of suffering. You may be in a time of turmoil right now. You may be in a horrendous trial. You may be in a situation of unknown. And you find yourself saying, Lord, what am I doing here? And you may find yourself saying, Lord, I was put on this road. I had no control over it. Why am I sitting here? Or you may find yourself saying, part of the roads were out of my control, but I also realize I may have had a part in this, but here I am. And you may even be quoting, or someone may be quoting to you, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him. He shall direct your paths. Yeah. And he has directed my paths to here. I'm sitting in prison. I'm sitting in jail. Why? One writer shares some very powerful words. God was moving Joseph toward a place where all of self would be uprooted. He was a man of privilege. He had been placed in this incredible privilege by his father. And God said, I'm going to uproot all of it. God was moving Joseph toward a place where all of self would be uprooted, and such results are often only obtained by one kind of training, affliction. And maybe you're there. We don't know where the roads may lead, but sometimes we know where they have led, and we cry out, God, do you deliver? Does your heart of love, does your hands of care, do they reach to where I am to get me out of this? God, do you deliver? And the last item it leads me to is this. Because sometimes we don't know where the roads may lead, but we know where they've led. But do we believe that the road of delivery will come when delivery comes? The fact is, I do believe that God was already delivering Joseph in the prison. One of the things he was delivering him from was bitterness. I don't know what he wrestled with, and when we get to talk to Joseph in heaven, he may share with us how, some of the times and what was on his mind and at what point his heart turned a certain way so that later he would be able to say to his brothers, you meant it for evil against me, but God meant it for good. All I have for you is love. All I have for you is love. God was delivering him, but it wasn't necessarily the deliverance that we would be looking for yet. And as he's in there, some other prisoners come in and they tell him their dreams, and Joseph is able to interpret one of them. And in chapter 40 and verse 12, Joseph said to the chief cupbearer who was in jail, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to your former custom when you were his cupbearer. Verse 14, only keep me in mind, because I'm feeling a little forgotten in here. That's why I think it's been quite a time, right? Keep me in mind when it goes well with you. And please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house. Deliver me out of here. And his words were true. And the chief cupbearer, it all came true. And he was delivered just as Joseph said he would. Verse 23, yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Forgot him for at least 2 full years. That's why we say it was at least 2 years, right? You're saying, wait a minute, hold on a second. Are you trying to tell me it's going to be 2 years? I have nothing. I'm not setting any times on anything. What I'm saying is this. Do you believe that God is a God who does deliver you? In the situation, out of the situation. He was forgotten, but God had not forgotten him. And eventually Pharaoh has a dream that he needs interpreted. And we read in chapter 41 and verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came to Pharaoh, right? When he got himself cleaned up out of the dungeon. And what does God eventually do in chapter 41, verse 41? He raises him up. And Pharaoh said to Joseph in Genesis 41:41, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand and clothed him in garments of fine linen and put the gold necklace around his neck. And he has been raised up. God delivers him. I share the story of Joseph with you this morning because I wanted to encourage you to be reminded of this, that God has not changed. He hasn't changed. He had the ability to deliver Joseph at any time, and yet the roads led Joseph to a place where he sat. Why? Because the very same God who delivered Joseph, sometimes his plan in our lives is to allow the roads of life to lead you to a place where you need his deliverance. Because that's where he wants you. He wants you at a place where you will cry out to him, God, do you deliver? And in that place, He wants you to reaffirm your faith that, yes, I believe that He's there. I don't know what you're going through. But you know where the road has led you. When I feel all alone, You are there. When all things seem unknown, You are there. When I am lost without a way, when I can't find the words to pray, in times like these, I hear You say, You are there, You are there. Your words can calm my aching heart. Your love, the healing process starts. Your hands can reach each broken part. You are there. When I've been beat and bruised, You are there. When love has been refused, You are there. When I am lost without a way, when I can't find the words to pray, in times like these, I hear You say, You are there, You are there. Your words can calm my aching heart. Your hands, the healing process starts. Your love can reach each broken part. You are there. Those skies around are gray. He is here. There's strength for you today. For God is here. Oh, if you are lost without a way, if you can't find the words to pray, in times like these, you'll hear Him say that He is here. He is here. Your words can calm my aching heart. Your hand, the healing process starts. God's love can reach your broken heart, 'cause He is here. Your love can reach my broken heart, for You are there. Father in heaven, we only know the roads You've had us on. And sometimes we are experiencing anguish. And on one level, it may help to compare it to someone else's and gain the perspective that we're only tasting a bit of the anguish they're tasting. But Lord, in the moment, it's just where we are. Thank you, oh God, that you deliver. Oh Father, anybody here right now, we ask you that they would turn to you and say, God, deliver me. Deliver me. In the powerful name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.